Zach Leary, thank you so much for coming to my show. It is an honor to get to connect heart to heart with you. What I know about you is that you're a soul looking for grace, and it's so aligned to who I am and the work I'm doing. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're up to now?
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I guess we kind of spend our lives looking for grace in whatever form it comes in. If it's obvious or elusive, nuanced, right there in front of you, or something that you have to keep digging for, or always searching for it. What am I up to at the moment? I guess kind of splitting my time between three different areas of my own psychedelic research and work. One is writing a book called "And Now the Work Begins," which is a kind of a snapshot on the modern psychedelic renaissance with an emphasis put on integration. And I do an online course, a psychedelic guide intensive, which helps educate people and arm them with as much knowledge and depth as possible, and trains them to become an effective, safe, and compassionate psychedelic guide. Yeah, that's about the bulk of what keeps me busy these days.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm interested in that course, and I'm really looking forward to the book coming out.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so a little bit about, I have some addiction in my own history, and I'm a nurse who, really got into drinking wine and had wine every night, and then finally gave it up. And in that sobriety, I would never have thought of using psychedelics because I was afraid that I wouldn't have something to soften the edge if anything became too much. So it took me a while before I was introduced to them, and it really changed my life. And I love what you talk about Gabor Mate's work, about how you really love a lot of his work as far as trauma and our past. But I also loved what you said, and as far as us having the chemical nature, and some of us are more attuned to that. I'd love to hear some more about that.
Yeah, I think this is kind of just getting to more of the science behind addiction. There's no question that the vast majority of people who have addiction problems, specifically substance abuse, have an event in their lives, or a series of events in their lives that have created some form of trauma, whether it's childhood root trauma or later life trauma, or intimate partner violence, parental issues. Whatever it is. There's no question about that. It's not too common where somebody who is just going all along in life, really feeling like they are living their dharma and everything's going along pretty well, and all of a sudden they get addicted to a hard recreational drug and things just kind of fall off the path. That happens, but it's usually a response to something deeper, a coping mechanism, a way to, it's kind of like the antithesis of psychedelics. It's a way to not feel. It's a way to sort of make feeling neutral, and really kind of creates that neutrality within your own emotional intelligence, to where you don't really care about much one way or the other. You're just trying to soften the edges to the point to where life just becomes sort of like this pillowy cloud of non-feeling. And, while that might be effective at first, it certainly was for me at the very beginning, there's no way to sustain that from both a pragmatic level and an emotional level. It just eventually will create a lot of dissonance in your life. So there is, of course, the contributing factors of trauma that creates an emotional unsteadiness in you, and people that seeks an outside healing mechanism, right? It's only natural. But as I was saying, I know within myself, and with countless others, that when I put a certain drug into my body, there is the absence of an off switch. And it doesn't matter how spiritually attuned I am, it doesn't matter how much meditation I do, how spiritually aware I think I am, or how good my life is, how much money I have in the bank, how good my interpersonal relationships are. When I put that drug into my body, it just doesn't work out. There's an absence of an off switch. So I do think that there's a myriad of contributing factors. And I love what Gabor Mate does. I mean, he's a fantastic mind and a beautiful heart. But I do think, to be fair to, all the addicts in the world, we do have to look at it holistically, not just from a trauma-informed lens, but also from a scientific lens. And there's kind of a factor of contributions there.
Yeah, there's definitely a multi-dimensional situation happening. So I started this podcast, really looking into transformation, and I really realized that we can't transform unless we're tapped into the mystical. And even looking with the founder of AA, Bill W., he did have his mystical experiences with psychedelics. So can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's not only that, but also when he was first, in the early part of the 20th century, when alcoholics were put in sanitariums, the local county sanitarium. That's how you treated alcoholics. You put them in the quote unquote loony bin, and that was about it. Either get them to dry up and come to their senses, or just keep them there. And when he was in there, he had an experience on belladonna, which was used as a sedative of the time, of the era, which gave him that amazingly beautiful, brilliant download, which is known as the chapter 5 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the 12 steps, and really an amazing download of human consciousness. I love what Bill W. did. And for a man of his time, he certainly was pretty progressive. But he was going along, in AA, and watched this fellowship just grow to hundreds of thousands of people. And by the 1950s, I think he was becoming, late 1950s, was becoming a little frustrated with, okay, well, now what? I'm sober, that's great, and this fellowship is great, but now what? Now how do I keep getting closer to God? Because that's what our program is essentially teaching, to fill the void of your substance abuse with the presence of some sort of spiritual contact. And he came across LSD because he was made aware of the studies that they were doing, particularly on the West Coast, UCLA with Dr. Humphrey Osmond, and very successful treatments of LSD in a psychotherapeutic setting, very kind of traditional psychiatric settings. And he got very curious, and he ended up doing LSD, I believe it was 5 times in a short period of time, relatively short period of time. And he called it the great ego sublimator, and thought it would have been a cure for alcoholism. And I think he would have gone along to keep on doing it, but his wife was actually the one who pulled the reins in and was like, yeah, I don't think the rest of the fellowship is going to take too kindly to that. Which is like essentially the schism that we see in the modern 12-step community, which I'm still a part of, by the way, but there's a tremendous tension with the idea that you can treat one substance abuse disorder with another substance. And that goes against sort of the basic premise of 12-step ideology. And I'm, like I said, I'm still a member, and, I can't help that the fellowship at large can't evolve in a way that I want them to. So I just kind of meet them where they're at, and I take the parts that work for me, and the parts that don't are between me and God, and so I do think, yeah, there's tremendous potential for psychedelic work to maintain your recovery. I think, of course, there's tremendous potential for like ibogaine, for getting opiate addicts off of the drug, for sure. That is one thing. But I think there's a tremendous potential in early sobriety, recovery, whatever you want to call it, to really expand your awareness of your recovery and where it sits in your life. Because what's the one thing psychedelics do is they bring you face to face with your own stuff, you know, the good stuff and the bad stuff and the challenging stuff. You know, psychedelics are a confrontational drug. They're not escapist drugs. So if you have a behavior in your life that is causing you pain to yourself, to others, and to your place in the world, psychedelics will confront you with that pain and make you take a look at it. So it's can be an amazing tool for the recovery community. And there are great people out there doing great work, like the Psychedelics and Recovery Group by Danielle Negrin, and all sorts of people doing good stuff.
Thank you so much for that. And I heard you on another podcast talking about a soul looking for grace, and I just fell in love with that. And I know that you lost your father when you were 23. Is that
22?
22. And you know, being older now, we go through a lot of different transformations in our life. And I know, okay, so you were 22 when you lost your dad, and you had to do an identity recreation at that point. Looking back now, can you tell me a little bit about the different times in your life that you did have to continue to do identity recreation in significant ways? I also heard you talk about meeting Ram Dass in a different way. Was that a part of it? I mean,
yeah, it's all kind of connected. I mean, Ram Dass said this very amazing thing to me a year earlier when I was about 21. I was coming out of a flotation tank, isolation tank, and I was happened to be on a little bit of ketamine, and I was in this isolation tank, and things got really, really challenging, and I just had to get out of the tank. I was like, okay, this is too much. And then I popped open the hatch, and sitting right outside, this tank was up at our house, where my family home, and sitting right outside of the door of the tank was my dad and Ram Dass. And I didn't know that. And they didn't know I was in the tank. And they were just sitting on some 2 chairs, kind of overlooking the lawn and everything. And I came out of this, this altered state, just panicked. And Ram Dass just stared at me, and he said, "Who are you now?" And I remember that really stuck with me, the "who are you now" mantra, you know, with the suggestion being that the "who are you now" should be, in an ideal state, should be constantly evolving, constantly changing. The idea to be static in your own identity, in your own evolution, in your own idea of self is, I think, pretty counterintuitive to the human mystical experience, which is about growth and change. And the only constant in the universe is change, right? It's what the Tao Te Ching tells us. And that includes us, that includes our personalities, our dharma is about moving along on the path. It's not about just staying at one place on the path. You know, but that said, you know, I think the path of, you know, dharmic harmony does require one to have a certain skill set that can be adaptable within this crazy world that we've created. And should you lack sort of a skill set to deal with life as it comes, you know, finding your dharma can be really tricky, can be sometimes really painful. And for me, early on, it was very painful. And, you know, my dad's orbit was pretty big. It's pretty large. He was a larger than life character, and life with him, when he was around, you know, everything kind of revolved around that sun, and that sun was shining very bright, and it shined so bright it didn't really require me to do much other than just to be, you know, and I had everything that was just kind of brought to me. And then when that sun was extinguished, I was kind of left going, oh, okay, well, I don't really know what to do in the world. How do I be in the world? And that was also on very basic things like how to pay bills, how to write checks. I mean, we're talking mundane life activities that I didn't know how to do. And then on big things like on things that are a little bit deeper, I mean, like I didn't know how to ask women out. I didn't know how to kind of turn my passions into something that was kind of a career, or you know, I really didn't know how to find my way, and it left me reeling, you know, and definitely lost and scared and the world seemed big and scary, and it still does. Of course, it still does. But I think, like, back to that skill set, I think I've developed enough sort of coping mechanisms and tools of reflection that allow me to not have so much, tension within this thing called life, to be able to kind of dance with its ups and downs a little bit more. The Hindus and the yogic system call it the Leela. The Leela is the divine play. Your life is the Leela, and everything is just a divine play and a reflection of the divine. And within that comes, joy and triumph and success and beauty, but also can come sadness and depression and yearning and things like that. But it all works together. One doesn't have to outweigh the other. And if you just look at it sort of with a little bit more elasticity, I don't think pain doesn't have to define you, and it can become just a stepping stone.
Yeah, a great mentor of mine says that sadness is a very pure human emotion. And when we really allow it, often in the psychedelic space, when we really just let it be and we can see the beauty and the humanity in it, that's when we really can get it to lift. And I love that idea. And then, people struggle with anxiety, and it's kind of a different landscape there, where we're reminded, and I'm curious what you're teaching in your course now. With anxiety, we're kind of reminded, like, slow down. What does your body want? I mean, because it's just like every day you talk about this skill set, and it's like every day we start over and we kind of check in with, okay, what's our skill set? How do I feel? How I can, how much ice cream am I going to eat?
Sure, definitely. Well, I mean, but anxiety specifically is a really interesting, rich topic to discuss in 2021. Specifically in this day of age. I think, we're coming head on with our relationship with anxiety as a species in it, within our little microcultures, because I think no matter how you feel about what's going on in the world, it doesn't matter where your ideologies are. There's a lot going on right now. Some of it very difficult to comprehend. Very difficult to make peace with, and of course some amazing stuff. I mean, some amazing healing revolutions. What's happening in the world of psychedelics is amazing. What we're seeing with people kind of questioning the overall program of life and how to kind of do what they want to do with happiness is an amazing thing to see. But there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of uneasiness going on in the world as we see it. And, like you said, that requires us starting over on a daily basis. It's tough to reconcile.
Yeah, the whole culture, we talk about, doing the Great Resignation. And I know that you were a pioneer in your own Great Resignation, because you were in corporate America for a while.
Once, yeah.
And then, so you kind of were a pioneer in leaving that. I'm curious how hard that was, because you were recreating your identity, and there was a lot telling you, I'm sure, ingrained in your mental self-talk that's, because I remember you saying in a podcast that you were almost a senior and really kind of, doing a great job in that realm. How difficult was it to shift out of that and really let that go? How long did it take to where you gave yourself permission to go the route that your heart wanted you to go?
Oh, that's a good question. It probably took, at least a year or two, I would think. The biggest initial short-term drawback was like the financial security, right? And I think that is probably why most people who have successful, quote unquote, careers in a traditional sense choose to bypass inner reflections of harmony or happiness or fulfillment, because the financial security is very solid. And that is just a necessary part of our existence in the West, no matter how you feel about money or capitalism, we all have to eat. We all have to pay our rent. And, the sense of financial security, I think, covers up a lot of the inner turmoil that people face. It's like we're really taught in the West to suck it up. You go to work anyway. You go home, you go to work, you go back home, you bitch about your boss, the job that they're telling you to do, the nitpicking, your lack of enthusiasm about the project that you have to work on. You go home, complain about it, you suck it up, and you go back the next day. And it's just this routine, and so much so that it's become ingrained in just our culture. Like there is this celebration of like, thank God it's Friday, right? And if you think about that, how absurd that really is. Why are we're celebrating the end of the week with the implication being that our week sucks. And therefore we have this weekend to celebrate. Oh my God, now I don't have to work. Well, it shouldn't be that way. It should be, thank God it's Monday. I get to participate in this thing called life. And, little things like that really started to bother me. It's like this celebration of this anguish and this despair. And oh my God, it's like counting days off a prison sentence. Oh my God, it's going to end now. Yay. It shouldn't be like that. That is such a really sad paradigm that we've created for ourselves. And yeah, and it's, no disrespect to people. I know so many brilliant people who work in the industry that I used to work in, and they're content and happy, and it's not a judgment on them at all. They found their purpose within those confines. For me, it just didn't work. For a variety of reasons, but the main reason was that no matter what I was doing, no matter how great my clients were or what great account I happened to be on, it was always somebody else's vision that I was executing. And I was just sort of like this cog in this vision of something. I had my little role to play. And after a while, that just didn't excite me anymore. It left me feeling pretty empty. But what it also did too, it also got so bad that I ended up, like, I think the last year of my career, I don't think I was very good at it. It started to show, like the first decade, I was really good at it. And then I stopped being good at it, and it started to show. And then when that started to happen, when I saw I was going to work and not really being good at my job and affecting the performance, and I was like, something's not right here. And that was just my story, but I encourage everybody to find fulfillment, in whatever it is they do. And it's like, there's a great Buddhist koan that talks about the world needs ditch diggers too. And if you're going to be the ditch digger, be the best ditch digger that you can be. And you do it as an act of love and devotion and an expression of the divine. Everybody has the role to play. And if you have a role to play it with love. And it doesn't mean that if you're playing a role that you're not maybe happy playing, doesn't mean that you can't continue to evolve on a parallel path,
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I remember, waiting for other nurses to retire, and then upon retiring, they would die. And I remember hitting that time clock, every day, imagining this elusive retirement. And, I also heard you say, the path will show itself. Let it go and see what happens. Have you found when you let that go, just things start to happen? And what is the gift in your life and in your heart and your soul that you're trying to share with the world now? And how do you see yourself as a part of the psychedelic movement now?
Well, the first part of that sentiment and that question really requires, I think, that spiritual attunement that comes from engaging in your spiritual practice, whatever method that you choose. And when you do it regularly enough and kind of create enough awareness and, as Ram Dass would say, loving awareness of your role as it relates to your dharma, as it relates to your soul, as it relates to the collective soul and expression of life, And within that, when you really start kind of getting in that repetition of that kind of cycle of awareness, you're able to listen. That's the great byproduct, is you're able to listen to what the universe is telling you, to what God or the divine or whatever it is telling you. And you refine your listening capabilities, and you're able to sort of hear the signposts along the wall or along the path, instead of pushing them away and saying, okay, maybe that feels right. Maybe I should go in that direction. And, you know, which is just as important as knowing what not to listen to, and as what to eliminate. You know, just the process of Dharma is just as much about elimination as much as it is addition. Stripping away the things that don't work for you. It doesn't mean that you have to know everything that you're supposed to be doing all the time, but you know what maybe isn't working, right? You know, toxic relationships, energy sucks, spending time doing things that maybe you should spend a little less time doing, eating badly, lack of exercise, et cetera, whatever it is. Yeah, and then so for me, it took a variety of years. And in respect to the psychedelic movement, you know, a big part of my reason for working in the corporate side of things was that I wanted to get as far away as the psychedelic movement as I could. Because initially I thought, like, hey, this has nothing to do with me. I'm just guilty by association. You know, this is someone else's thing. And I really had no, you know, I really didn't have my own voice, you know, and I'd always get invited to some kind of psychedelic conference now and then, and would kind of be on a panel that would talk about like the legacy godfathers and the legacy culture and stuff, and so on and so forth. But then, you know, after, especially as I really started to ignite my spiritual practice, I started to discover that I had my own voice. And that, you know, my beliefs and my interests and sort of my passion focus within the psychedelic community was my own. It wasn't my father's, and it wasn't other people's. And I was like, oh, okay, this is really interesting. I'm finding this little niche for myself that seems to be somewhat original and somewhat needed. And that just grew and grew and grew and grew until I started kind of developing a methodology for not just my own methodology. It was kind of based off of other people's, but then infusing my own for how to conduct guided sessions, which I do with clients privately, one-on-one. That started turning into podcasting and working with maps and giving more talks and so on and so forth. And it just kind of grew into, you know, it also, thanks to the modern explosion of the modern psychedelic renaissance, which is more has happened in the last 15 years than in the previous 60, you know, so incredible. But with that has come so much amazing research and science and data to look at. But it's also caused, you know, us, I think, to also stop, pause, and reflect and look at the things that, hey, maybe this isn't working for us. Maybe we should try talking about this more, and maybe a little bit more, less about this. And, you know, so there's a lot of fantastic passion and discourse going on that I'm blessed to find myself in the middle of.
I am reading Michael Pollan's book, and it's interesting. He kind of mentions, you know, there's a lot of chemists and scientists who, you know, immediately become mystics because they're so transformed by psychedelics. And there's others who really feel like they have this righteousness, this ego happening there. Do you have any thoughts on that? And what do you think is happening there? And how can we kind of...
Happening with what? Say, repeat it again, sorry.
Where we have chemists and scientists become immediately mystics because they're so transformed by psychedelics, which is just beautiful. And then on the other hand, sometimes we have those that feel really righteous, and there's almost an arrogance of, I know something you don't. How can we work with that and stay really in our own humility and our humanity? What are your opinions with that difference?
Well, there is a great, you know, in the modern psychedelic community, and I say this with love, you know, I do, but there is a great gold rush to be the next psychedelic luminary. There's an absence of, like the first round had Ram Dass, Terence McKenna, Timothy Leary, John Lilly, Oscar Janiger, Stanislav Grof, and like these truly luminous characters were just, really seemed to get it and were able to kind of translate that message to the rest of us. And they created kind of these iconic modern avatars and truly brilliant minds. And now there's a rush for people to try to fill those voids. And any given movement is subject to the symptom of cult of personalities, right? I mean, look at yoga, look at the yoga explosion in America. When it first started to really bubble in the 90s and explode, there became yoga teachers who were becoming guru status, and that is just symptomatic of the human experiences. We attach the cult of personality to it. And there's a lot of people like really rushing and attaching ego and prominence and things like that. And, I don't pay much attention to that. I laugh and have a good time with it and see people just kind of dancing around and, having the fun and the dance of the ego, as it were. It is a little contradictory, though, because psychedelics are all about the dissolution of the ego, and therefore you have so many people who are really fueling the ego about, hey, I know more, I get it, you don't, let me tell you why. Like I recently heard on some talk in person, I won't say who it was, but he started off the talk about saying, do you guys want to know what consciousness is? Do you want me to tell you how consciousness works? Let me tell you. And then immediately I was like, whoa, you've got it all figured out? You know what consciousness is? Really? It's like, nobody, it's like, it's just for people to have so much certainty about these huge ephemeral ideas that are the mysteries of life. We're not supposed to understand what consciousness is, and to give people these absolute views on the mysteries and the mysticism of our humanity is a kind of counter to what the psychedelic movement is about. I don't know. I just think that, it's up to each one of us to stay humble and to lead by example. I mean, we're all stewards of the modern psychedelic renaissance, which is really the most important thing to remember. It's like anybody who's actively participating in this movement today, whether it's in a group setting, talking about it, doing podcasts on it, or in a personal relationship with it, we're all stewards for it. And we all have to do our best to be good stewards of it. So misinformation doesn't happen and the movement doesn't get soured,
Yeah, and there's so much to be said about doing our own work and our own humanity and our own default mode network.
Yeah.
If we continue to work on that and lift ourselves out of it, would you mind giving us a little window into your humanity and maybe some thoughts and ideas of who you were that you were able to really lift yourself out of with the work that you've done personally? I know that when you were doing psychedelics when you were really young and your dad advised you against it and why, but further on, later on in your life, can you give us a window into that?
I mean, my great kind of, I guess, vehicle for my own suffering has been substance abuse. And I've been in recovery since the late 90s and have been clean the vast majority of the time. But there have been occasional, very short relapses that have caused myself and my harmonic structure and those around me some harm. But fortunately, I don't ever fall too far off the path. It just is a little blip. And like I said, I've been clean, sober, and in recovery for, years and years and years, the majority of those years. And I look at it always as just, we all can't ascend up the mountain constantly. You've got to descend a little bit and sort of get checked a little bit about, what it is you think you know, who it is that you think you are. And right when you think you know who you are, you usually get slapped around a little bit by the cosmic mother saying, oh, this is because it's who you think you are. It's not who you truly are. And your ego comes into play and you start moving away from your soul and so on. And that is really, has been my journey, and it's been the one that I've had to reconcile the most with and learn how to dance with and learn how to learn from, basically, so it doesn't get me so far down that I become hopeless. I mean, there are so many specifics to share, of course, but I mean, I really think that's kind of the gist of it. And I think everybody has some form of suffering in their life, whether it is a traumatic event, a self-induced behavior, maybe the quench for desire in one specific area, some imbalance in a specific area, and everybody has their own sort of barometer to work with, right?
Mm-hmm. I have this visual where, we get stuck in these dark holes and we're trapped, and there's a hand that will reach out to you, and we've got to always grab on to the next hand that is reaching for us. And I just want to remind people of that. It's, a lot of people get stuck a lot of times, and it's okay. And I love you sharing your own humanity, because I really want to make it real that we all get stuck in those holes. And I love how you described going down the mountain every time that we're ascending. That feels really real. We don't always understand ourselves to be, perfect and enlightened and
Right. I mean, and it's, the great, one of the most famous TED Talks, I think, in the history of TED Talks is the Brene Brown vulnerability talk, that came out well over a decade ago now, probably has over 100 million views at this point. And she did this amazing thing by taking something that was right in front of us, this concept that we intellectually knew what it meant, but that the practice of vulnerability is an art in and of itself. And that, even if you become a so-called authority figure in your certain line of whatever it is that you're into, it doesn't mean that you stop being vulnerable. It doesn't mean that you stop reflecting on your own personal struggles, and that creates the idea of what Ram Dass would call phony holy. And you see in the, like the modern view of the guru system in India, it's like, God, at this point that, so many people who think of gurus, they think of these guys who perform fake magic tricks and sleep with your wife and steal your money. And it's like, and it's really due to like an absence of vulnerability. Everybody has the role to play in their own humanity, which is a reflection of the collective humanity. We all are out there taking swings at life and trying to find what it is that works. And, some people are definitely more advanced than others. There's no question, the great spiritual teachers of our time. But, to be honest about your own vulnerabilities is such an important, beautiful thing to do, I think, right?
Right. Do you think that Ram Dass later on in his life checked in with himself and questioned his own vulnerability and humanity?
Definitely. So much so. I mean, that was the great thing about Ram Dass, is he was really, and if you listen, I mean, later on in life, his speech got greatly slowed. So he wasn't able to really go into those deep dives of sort of verbal explorations like he was to do before the stroke. But if you listen to some of those career lectures of his, I mean, so much of it is about his own struggles as well, and his ability to reconcile it with the spiritual path. But yeah, I thought Ram Dass was a beautiful example of how to stay human in the midst of all of this. Yeah, beautiful teacher.
That's amazing. So you're happy being in Texas right now?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I do, Tanya, I do. I lived in LA the vast majority of my adult life. And, you know, I guess if you just continue doing one thing all the time, maybe you should mix it up. And it was just time for a change. And so I came to Austin. Yeah, I like it so far. So far, so good. Thank you.
Are you married?
I'm not, no, but I live with my partner.
Do you have animals?
I have a cat. Yeah.
So, okay, this is a question for you. So you talked about teaching an integration course, and we can't, I have a mentor who is a physician who does a lot of ketamine therapy, and he still thinks that we're years and years and years away from ever having, you know, legal movement in the realm. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. What are your thoughts on, you know, these certifications that aren't really just, you know, board certified, that we're kind of giving each other with, you know, these different schools?
Yeah, I mean, I do it. I give those certifications, you know, I get it. But I'm very clear that, you know, I don't give you a certification. It's not about completing my course. It's just, I'm here to share knowledge. What you choose to do with it is up to you. And I have no opinion on that, to be honest. You know, I mean, in respect to psychedelics specifically, you know, I'm a cognitive libertarian first and foremost. To be overly concerned about the legal framework of it is selling ourselves short, because it goes back to the classic argument of all substances. People are going to continue to do them no matter what, period. We know that, right? So the harm reduction lens tells us that, well, okay, we have to accept that it's part of all humanity to change the way that they want to feel. They've been doing it since day one, whether it was alcohol, cannabis, the opioid crisis, psychedelic, sacred plant medicines, whatever it is, human beings will change the way that they feel using an external source. So the harm reduction lens tells us, well, since that is a truth, that is an absolute, why not make it the safest administration route possible? Why not make it, you know, reduce the harm, reduce the side effects, increase education, learn about how to do it wisely, learn how not to do it wisely, learn what to do, what not to do. Yeah, so I mean, in answer to your question, all these, you know, I'm very specific in my course that you completing my course doesn't mean anything. It just means that it means that you took your course, and I hope you got something out of it. But I'm not here. I don't give you a medical certification or anything like that. I just provided a framework to share 8 pillars of knowledge through 16 classes, and are divided up into a very specific way that I hope are effective. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and we've seen this all the, you know, and like in the yoga community, again, another yoga metaphor, but when the yoga teacher explosion was happening, like there was like the Yoga Alliance certification. People would look at teacher training. So this is certified by the Yoga Alliance. And I know many great teachers who would think it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It just, why does the Yoga Alliance have a monopoly on how you are practicing asana? It doesn't really mean anything.
Wow.
Yoga is a study it's a spiritual and scientific exploration into human consciousness, and asana exercise is just a part of it, you know, so.
Good job with that analogy. That's, you know, talking about the yoga explosion and the yoga bubble and the psychedelic bubble. I really, really like that, and how you have shoes to fill with the gurus there. I'm curious for anybody who's listening, who's interested in doing their own psychedelic work. I'm curious how passionate you are, particularly about the importance of integration.
Integration is so important. You know, we have to learn to make sense of these transformations and these downloads and these shifts in the very energetic structure of your own human nature, and making sense of your psychedelic experience, really extracting the downloads, extracting sort of the metaphorical visions that come to you and assigning meaning to them, that becomes useful and applicable to your daily life, is at the heart of integration. Instead of just like, oh my gosh, I got so high on psilocybin and all these various metaphors and downloads came to me. I have no idea what they mean at all. It was crazy. It was weird. I saw these visions. I don't know what they mean. It didn't mean anything. Move on with my life. Which is a very, it can be very symptomatic of the psychedelic experience, because it is very akin to a dream state, to a non-ordinary states of consciousness. And our brains, our nervous system wants us to forget experiences that occur in the non-ordinary states of consciousness world, because we have to live in this reality where I'm talking to you, Tanya, on this Zoom thing, on this computer software, and I see my computer is gray and the keys are black, and it's this agreed upon construct of reality that our nervous system wants us to all agree on. And so when you have something that disrupts that, it's very difficult to make sense of it. So I am all for the various protocols that are being developed, and I'm trying to develop a protocol of my own that really helps people take those psychedelic experiences, extract the meaning from them, and in a way that is useful for their day-to-day life. And the heart of that really comes in the 7 days post journey, because that is the sweet spot. That is the time when your energy system, your chakra system, your brain is still open and sponge-like, and before it kind of clams back in. And taking those 7 days after the journey and really reflecting, meditating, writing down, journaling, talking with an integration coach if helpful, to make it useful and long-lasting.
That's beautiful. I see a lot of, I think everyone has a part to play, and we have this unique piece of the quilt as integration coaches and leaders to give. And so I think it's really valuable to go in this landscape and to feel okay about creating your own, as you said.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw, my main interest in the psychedelic community and main sort of passion play is making sure that the spiritual transformation does not get lost. As we see the advancement of the medicalization model, which is great. It's a means to an end. It gives us data. It shows us that it's safe. It shows all the naysayers that it's safe. But I don't want the future of psychedelics to be in the hands of your psychiatrist and white lab coats and keeping psychedelic sessions dry and sterile. I try to keep the ritual alive and the mysticism alive. And it was out of that need and the response to the medicalization movement that I saw in sort of a need for an integration model that is useful for all of it. It's not just for spiritual practitioners, it's also for therapeutic practitioners as well. It's a kind of a medium.
That is so, so beautiful. I'm so grateful for that. Do you feel the son of your dad still close to you in the psychedelic realm and in daily life?
Of course. How can I not? In the psychedelic realm, it's impossible to escape it. His name is still spoke of often. It's sometimes spoken with great reverence and love, and it's sometimes spoken in, he's blamed for a lot of things that he shouldn't be blamed for, and he gets a bad rap unnecessarily. And so I find myself having to course correct history a lot. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he's alive and well, and I think right next to me.
Oh, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of that today. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention for anybody out there struggling or looking for their own path in this way?
The one thing that I would just say for anybody who's struggling or just on the path and looking for answers is that any answers that you'll find that have been illuminated by a teacher, a method, a practice, a piece of literature, whatever it is, that has been alive inside of you all along. It's already existed in your own heart and soul, and for some reason it's just gone dormant. And know that everything is within you all along, and any external push in a direction, it's just a reminder. We're all just reminders to walk each other to the light and walk each other home.
Oh my God, that is so beautiful. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.